Welcome to JK Tells a Story, where real-life dramas unfold. Sit back and enjoy today's tale. Michelle and I met in 9th grade and quickly started dating, becoming a strong couple by 10th grade. Throughout high school, we had an even relationship, culminating in the classic moment of becoming intimate at graduation. After that, we couldn't get enough of each other, using every opportunity for closeness. By 11th grade, we had already discussed the possibility of marriage and decided to wait until college to tie the knot. But college seemed to have changed Michelle. In high school, our classmates knew that Michelle and I had a serious relationship that scared off unwanted attention from guys. But when we went to college, where most of the students were from different places, Michelle stopped being perceived by others as mine. Instead, she began to be perceived as an attractive girl and was often approached by guys. Although I knew about it, there was little I could do to prevent it. Michelle and I had different specialties and different schedules, so usually our paths crossed only in the evenings after classes and work. I noticed changes in Michelle's behavior during these meetings. She seemed more flirtatious than usual. More than once I watched her chat and laugh with other guys while I was on the opposite side of the square, unnoticed. It also happened that I caught a glimpse of her in the cafeteria with different guys, once with one, another time with two. It was only much later that I realized I had never seen her with other girls, only with guys. At that time I didn't care because we were a couple in love, planning to get married. She was a beautiful girl who naturally attracted attention, but she always showed me that she was mine every night when we were together. Years later, after graduating from university, finding jobs in our specialties, and getting married, we began a happy family life. For almost 6 years I embodied the image of fat, dumb, and happy, until reality hit me like a ton of bricks. It was a Thursday evening when I was driving home from a company mixer at the downtown Marriott. The rain was coming down hard, and visibility was poor on Highway 52. As I rounded the bend near Miller's Creek Bridge, I saw the twisted metal and shattered glass scattered across the asphalt. A blue sedan had slammed into the concrete barrier, steam rising from its crumpled hood. I pulled over immediately and ran to the wreckage. Inside, I found Brad Morrison, a guy I'd known since high school, slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling from his forehead. He was conscious but dazed. "Brad, can you hear me?" I shouted, checking for other injuries while calling 911. "Jake," he mumbled, trying to focus. What happened?" I helped him out of the vehicle, supporting his weight as we moved to safety. The paramedics arrived 20 minutes later and rushed him to Riverside General Hospital. I followed in my car and waited until his wife Sarah arrived. The doctors said he had a concussion and some bruised ribs, but he'd be fine. If I hadn't stopped when I did, things could have been much worse. The next evening, Brad called and asked if I wanted to grab a beer at Murphy's Tavern on 5th Street. "I owe you one, Jake," he said. "Actually, I owe you my life." I didn't mind because the bill wouldn't be very large. We talked about work for a while and moved on to other topics. Brad seemed nervous, fidgeting with his beer bottle and avoiding eye contact. Suddenly, Brad completely changed the subject. "I have a question for you, Jake," he said. "I know it's none of my business, but you're a good guy and I really value our friendship. After what you did for me last night, I'm wondering why you tolerate Michelle's behavior." "I don't quite understand what you mean," I replied, confused. "Why are you letting her cheat on you?" "What do you mean, Brad?" I asked, feeling my stomach drop. He looked at my expression, realized his mistake, and said, "Oh, you didn't know." He tried to get up, but I stopped him. "Brad, you can't just drop a bomb like that and then try to leave. Sit down and tell me everything." Reluctantly, he sat down and said, "I don't really know how to say this, Jake. You saved my life last night, and I can't let you keep living a lie." I encouraged him to be honest and share what he knew. "I thought you knew everything, Jake. It's been going on for over 10 years. How can you not know?" Brad looked genuinely surprised. I'm shocked that you don't understand what's been happening. What don't I understand, Brad? That Michelle has been involved with other men. I was speechless, unable to digest the information. I'm sorry I spoke up, Jake. I should have kept quiet, he said. I managed to get out of my state of shock and encouraged Brad to continue. How did you find out about this? And how long have you known? I found out about it in our last year of high school, and I know because I'm one of the many who was with her. I was completely overwhelmed by the information, but at the same time I felt an irresistible desire to learn more. Please start at the beginning, Brad. I begged. Don't leave anything out. The story that unfolded was shocking not only for its content but also for the fact that it had been happening for more than 10 years without my knowledge. According to Brad, it was 2 weeks after graduation when he went to his cousin Kevin's house as usual. He immediately entered the house and went to Kevin's bedroom, expecting to find him at the computer. But Kevin wasn't at the computer, he was with Michelle. I stood and watched them, Brad said quietly. They both noticed me, but neither of them told me to leave. I quietly joined them and waited for my turn. Kevin and I took turns with Michelle until she finally stopped us, saying she needed to freshen up before meeting you after her shift at Patterson's Market. Brad continued, Kevin and I continued to see Michelle when you were at work until Kevin began a serious relationship with Jenny Martinez. She was involved with me for a few weeks, but when I came to see her one day, she was already with Mike Bell and Justin Walsh. Without hesitation, I joined their activities. We would spend time with her until she had to leave to meet you. I wasn't the only one she shared herself with. She'd had several partners before me. You and I were buddies, but we weren't particularly close in our tumultuous teenage years when physical intimacy was the only thing we could think about. You had what looked like a relationship, but I didn't think it was too serious. After all, if it was serious, would she be with everyone she met? Brad took a long sip of his beer before continuing. Nothing changed when we went to college. I remember she had classes from Monday to Thursday and Tuesday to Friday, with no classes on Wednesdays. The last lesson ended at 2 p.m. on Monday and Thursday, and at 1 p.m. on Tuesday and Friday. I don't remember your schedule, but after class you would go to work, and Michelle would retire somewhere private. Wednesday became known as all-day activity day. This routine continued throughout college, regardless of the changing lesson schedules. Michelle always made herself available after class while you were working. This didn't happen every day, but rather 2 or 3 times a week. I felt sick to my stomach. Many of us guys were surprised when you and Michelle got married, Brad continued. We thought you knew about her extracurricular activities, but nevertheless decided to marry her. Many of us thought that you that you were okay with sharing your girlfriend with other men. Some even suggested that you and Michelle were into that lifestyle, but no one could remember seeing you with another woman while Michelle was often seen with other men. I didn't even know about it, Brad. There wasn't even a hint. I hate to tell you this, Jake, but you probably didn't know that she regularly spends Thursday nights with Bob and Bill Henderson, and on Tuesdays when you're bowling, she goes out with Mark Wilson. I don't know who else she spends time with, but I can say for sure that when you're busy with something, Michelle is also busy. Brad leaned forward, his expression serious. I made a conscious decision to stop seeing her when she got married. It's one thing to be involved with a single woman, but being with a married one is completely different. I don't know what you should do, Jake, but I know you have to act. I finished my beer, stood up, and thanked Brad for the meal and for helping me see things more clearly. As I drove home, Brad's words rang over and over in my head. Could I trust what he told me? Part of me kept saying it couldn't be true, Michelle wouldn't betray me like that. But then I couldn't get rid of the doubts. Why would Brad lie to me? I had to admit that Brad had no reason to deceive me. He knew that I would investigate his accusations, and if they turned out to be false, our friendship would be in jeopardy. If he had lied, further cooperation would have been impossible, and Brad knew it perfectly well. The thought of potentially losing Michelle was frightening, but the idea of living a lie was worse. I wondered what to do next. Would I have been able to survive a one-night stand or a short-term affair if Michelle had assured me that it wouldn't happen again? Maybe, but a 10-year pattern of deception? That was a completely different story. I was lying in bed pretending to be asleep when Michelle returned from work. I pretended not to notice the touch of her hand, as I did not want to participate in any intimacy. Although I had welcomed her affections in the past, now I realized how naive I had been. The next morning I got up early, made coffee, and read the newspaper before Michelle woke up. She asked me what happened the night before. I came home excited and ready, but I found you were already in bed, which was unusual for you, Jake, she said. You explained that you didn't feel well because you ate something, and that's why you went to bed early. I hope you're feeling better today. I need you to make up for last night. When I got to work, I called my old school friend Felix Miller, who now worked as a corporate lawyer, to ask him to recommend a divorce attorney. Oh no, he said. What's going on? This revelation showed that my hopes did not match reality. Your search for a divorce lawyer indicates that the relationship between you and Michelle is not what I thought. I thought you had an open marriage, given Michelle's actions and your obvious devotion to her. It would seem impossible to be so devoted if you didn't accept her behavior. Surprisingly, Felix, I only found out about Michelle's actions yesterday. After a short pause, Felix advised me to contact Thomas Wright and mention his name. I followed his advice and contacted Wright, who agreed to meet with me at 1 p.m. that afternoon. He explained that my divorce options ranged from a peaceful breakup to a more aggressive approach. In our state, adultery is recognized as a valid reason for divorce, but concrete evidence is necessary. How do I find the necessary evidence? I asked. Without saying a word, he went to his desk, took out a card, and handed it to me. The card read, Gordon Marshall, private investigator, with an office conveniently located across the street. I can call him and see if he can see you right now, he suggested. Please, I replied. I want to deal with this as soon as possible. While Wright was on the phone, I told him to start filing for divorce, promising to provide evidence as soon as it was available. 10 minutes later, Gordon Marshall was already discussing our next steps. Unfortunately, I had to maintain the appearance of a normal relationship with Michelle and not let her know that I was no longer the naive fool she was used to. Marshall said bluntly that to do this, we needed to stick to our usual routine, no matter how disgusting it might seem. If you usually were intimate 3 or 4 times a week, then you have to continue to initiate it, but without any emotional connection, he explained. The goal is simply to maintain physical habits without breaking Michelle's routine. We want her to remain unaware of the changes in our relationship. Back at my office, I worked up the courage and called Michelle at work. We usually had dinner on Fridays and breakfast together on Sundays. When I suggested dinner at Romano's restaurant, she agreed. While we were enjoying our meal, I had the veal marsala and Michelle had the ravioli. Marshall's investigation team was busy installing equipment. While I was enjoying a sip of Merlot, Marshall's words rang in my head about the importance of acting naturally. The desire to look for hidden cameras is quite natural, but resisting this desire is extremely important, he had warned. If she figures it out, all our work will go down the drain. In addition, it will not be easy to behave at ease in the bedroom, especially if you're not naturally sociable. The security system is equipped with sound and motion sensors, so you will be recorded. Don't let that stop you. There is a switch that can turn off the system while you're at home, but people often forget to turn it on when they leave. I suggest you leave it as it is and imagine that you're performing in a movie. Later, I invited Michelle to have a drink and dance after dinner, but she refused. She insisted on going home so that I could make it up to her for disappointing her the night before. On the way back, she moved closer to me in the car, being affectionate and playful. Please drive carefully, my love, she said. Don't run into anything that might cause an accident. As much as I hated what Michelle was doing, My body couldn't help but respond despite my disgust. After we returned home, Michelle urged me to hurry to the bedroom. I couldn't follow Marshall's advice. There was no way I could pretend to be calm knowing that cameras might be recording. The idea that I should behave naturally during intimate moments with Michelle seemed impossible. So I found the switches as instructed and turned off the system, leaving my mobile phone on the car seat as a reminder to turn the system back on when I left home. I don't know if Michelle noticed, but I didn't make love to her that night. I just went through the motions mechanically. Unfortunately, one round wasn't enough, and I had to endure 2 more before Michelle finally let me rest. I got ready for my daily run in the morning, and Michelle told me she wouldn't be home when I got back. She had an appointment with the hairdresser that was supposed to keep her busy until about 2 p.m. I'd always wondered why her visits to the hairdresser lasted so long, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Michelle claimed it was because she liked to chat with other clients and often went to lunch with them afterward. But given the recent revelations, I couldn't help but suspect that she was meeting one of her lovers either before or after the styling appointment. When I was about to leave, I didn't forget to turn on the system switch. Although I didn't expect anything to happen during my jog, it was important for me to establish the routine so that the system would be operational when I wasn't home. The switch controlled only the cameras, as the listening devices and phone monitoring were always active. After my usual 5-mile run, I returned home and headed to the basement, where I accessed the recording devices that Marshall had placed in a cabinet above my workbench. I chose the basement as the perfect location because Michelle almost never went down there, especially to my work area. Inside the cabinet were 2 receivers, one for listening devices and phone calls, and the other for a DVD recorder that captured footage from wireless cameras. When I examined the recorder, my suspicions were confirmed. A voice on the phone announced plans for a secret meeting. "Hello. Good morning, darling. Are we still meeting today?" "You bet. My wife took the kids to Lakewood Zoo, so we have until 6 p.m. You know I can't stay that long. I have to get home by 2 p.m. If I'm late, Jake might start getting curious. He's already started asking why I don't come home until 2 p.m. Let's skip the hairdresser appointment and meet early to get everything done on time." But what am I going to say to Jake when he asks why I've been gone so long and haven't done my hair? I really want to spend more time with you, but I'll have to be content with what I have. I immediately recognized my cousin Larry's voice. Back upstairs, I was furious and wondered how many more of my relatives she was involved with. But I managed to calm down by the time Michelle returned home from her hairdresser appointment an hour later. I pretended to fall down the stairs in the basement and informed her that I had injured my back, possibly pulled a muscle. This excuse would allow me to avoid intimacy with her for a few days. The following Monday, I called Michelle at her office and informed her that I would be leaving town on Tuesday and would be away until Friday. It was clear that the trip hadn't been planned, although 3 days seemed like enough time to gather evidence. I usually traveled once a month for business, and Michelle was always home when I contacted her by phone in the evening. Since my calls were at different times, usually between 7 and 10 p.m., I doubted that she was waiting for my call to leave. If she really was cheating on me as I suspected, then most likely she was doing it during our conversations, perhaps even in our bed. At least that's what I was hoping for. If she was unfaithful and the cameras recorded it, I would have the indisputable proof my lawyer needed for the divorce proceedings. That evening, Michelle expressed a desire for intimacy, but I used my back pain as an excuse to avoid it. When she kissed me goodbye on Tuesday morning, I left with my suitcase for the business trip. After spending most of the day at work, I returned to our neighborhood and parked a block away from our house. Using my laptop, I entered the code provided by Marshall, which activated the program he had installed on my computer. By pressing a few keys, I was able to listen to the recording of our phone line. "Hello. Hello, handsome. It's me. What happened? Hubby just left for a 3-day trip. Are you ready to spend 3 amazing nights with me? I take that as a yes. Are you going to call Tony? I have to go to work. I'll be home by 6 p.m. See you later. After turning off my laptop, I contacted Thomas Wright and instructed him to prepare the necessary papers for delivery by Thursday. I explained my special requirements for the service. Wright informed me that following my instructions would entail additional costs beyond the standard fee, but I insisted that I was willing to pay. Then I left the area and drove to the opposite end of the city, where I stayed in a motel for 3 days. There was a restaurant and bar next to the motel that quickly became my favorite place. I found great pleasure in visiting the bar, as it always brought a smile to my face. It was a country western style bar with a jukebox full of tunes that were perfect for dancing. Every evening I noticed several unmarried ladies who were willing to dance with any man sitting alone. On my first visit, I was enjoying a drink at the bar when a stunning red-haired woman approached me. "Come on, honey, they're playing our song," she said, took my hand, and dragged me to the dance floor. While we were dancing, she made it clear that she had come just for the love of dancing and nothing more. Her name was Rebecca, and she and her friends Linda and Sharon invited me to join them at their table after the dance. I danced with them in turn until 10:30 p.m., and then I had to leave. Rebecca mentioned that they often visited this place 2 or 3 times a week, and since I was staying at a nearby motel, I'd probably see them again in the next 2 nights. The next day at 3 p.m., I parked the car a block away from home and reviewed the recording made by the wireless cameras the night before. The 2 people who entered Michelle's bedroom were young men, much younger than her. I couldn't help but wonder if Michelle was seeking the energy and vitality of youth. There was nothing unusual about the actions captured on camera, typical intimate behavior, but it was unpleasant for me to watch my wife behave this way. The sight of Michelle being intimate with 2 men simultaneously didn't surprise me as much as the sound. To my surprise, there was relative silence. I half expected Michelle to mock me and my performance, but she didn't. The situation was the same as it always was on Wednesdays. The only mention of me was when one of the men expressed a desire to see Michelle more often. In response, Michelle explained that I was a priority when it came to her time. I learned that they needed to leave the premises by 6 a.m. so the neighbors wouldn't notice. Both Wednesday and Thursday mornings, they left the house at exactly 6 a.m., so I expected the same thing to happen on Friday. I contacted my lawyer and asked him to have the documents delivered on Friday at 5:45 a.m. On Friday, I parked my car next to the house. By 5:55 a.m., the front door opened and 2 men emerged. After saying goodbye to Michelle, who was standing at the door, they noticed a man approaching the house. He handed something to Michelle and then left, leaving her and her 2 companions to watch the retreating figure. I honked my horn to get Michelle's attention, waved goodbye to her, and drove away. Among the papers handed to her was my letter stating that I no longer wanted to communicate with her without the presence of our lawyers. I had no desire to understand the reasons for her actions. I didn't want to hear that her love for me was sincere and that her relationships with other people were meaningless. I refused to listen to explanations that we would be able to survive all this thanks to our love. I was not interested in the typical excuses that cheaters use when they're caught. Despite my clear message, Michelle completely ignored the letter. 15 minutes after I drove away from the house, my phone rang. It was Michelle. All her calls went to voicemail. When I arrived at the office, I told my secretary Martha not to take a single call from Michelle. When I was about to enter my office, I thought about it and turned back to her. "One more thing, Martha. If she comes here, please let her know that I'm not available. Tell her I've gone to meet a client." 5 minutes later, Martha poked her head through the door. "I talked to Iris at reception. If your wife shows up, she will warn me, and you can leave through the side door. You can go to the cafe and have coffee until she leaves." I expressed my gratitude to her. When she returned to her desk, I couldn't help but think that a competent secretary was truly invaluable. Despite the fact that Michelle called me 17 times that day, I decided not to answer any of her calls. During lunch, I called my father and brother to bring them up to date. I asked my father to inform my mother about the situation and asked her to refrain from trying to mediate between me and Michelle. It wouldn't be easy because my mother saw Michelle as the daughter she never had. By the end of the day, I had unfinished work. Not in a hurry to return home, I decided to stay and finish it. "Martha," I said, "I'll leave at 5 p.m. See you in the morning." "In addition," Martha said, "your wife tried to call you 5 times before noon, but I followed instructions not to transfer her calls. She seemed to understand because she hasn't called back since." My shift ended around 7 p.m., and when I entered the lobby, Iris was already gone. Hank, our night watchman, was sitting at the reception desk. "Are you going to spend a hot night in the city with your wife?" he asked. I quickly informed him that my wife and I were getting divorced and that she was waiting outside to talk to me. I asked Hank not to let her in and to tell her that I was unavailable. I also asked him to tell her that my car wouldn't start and that a tow truck would pick it up in the morning. Hank nodded and assured me that he would handle the situation. "I'm very sorry to hear that. Divorces are never easy. I know this from my own experience because I've been through 2 myself," Hank said. Trying to avoid unnecessary conversations, I quietly slipped out the back door and headed to Dave's diner, where I found a spot where I could watch Michelle waiting for me at my car. I ordered my usual meal and watched her closely while I ate. While enjoying dessert, I noticed her walk up to the building and press the call button on the intercom. Hank must have given her my message because she went back to her car and drove away. I finished my dessert, drank my last cup of coffee, and left. I stopped by the bar to have a couple of beers before heading back to the motel. The next morning was hectic. I was in a hurry to complete all the tasks I had neglected before confronting Michelle. I was afraid that I might be late and she would interfere with what I had to do. I went to First National Bank, emptied all the joint accounts, took the certificates of deposit and personal documents from the safe deposit box, but left Michelle's things. I took off my wedding ring and left it in the safe for her to find. After that, I went to Waffle House for breakfast and used my mobile phone to cancel the joint credit cards. Only Visa and American Express remained in my name. Michelle only had 2 cards in her name, so I just made sure she couldn't use them for cash withdrawals. After breakfast, I returned to the motel, parked the car, and called a taxi to the nearest Avis rental location. I rented the cheapest car available and returned to the motel. After lunch, I was relaxing by the pool reading a book. Before dinner, I turned on my cell phone and found 9 missed calls from Michelle. I deleted the voicemails and turned off the phone. After a light dinner, I decided to go to the bar where a live band performed on Friday and Saturday evenings, attracting a large crowd. I managed to find a place at the bar, ordered a beer, and quickly drank half of it before I felt my shirt being pulled. Turning around, I saw Rebecca standing there, inviting me to join her table. She playfully teased me for not noticing her in the crowded bar, but insisted that I join them. I hesitated, feeling like I might be intruding, but Rebecca brushed aside my concerns and invited me to sit with them. I got up from my seat and followed her to the table, where I noticed Linda and Sharon were also sitting. After taking a seat, I greeted the women and couldn't resist making a remark. "Something's wrong with this scene. 3 gorgeous women at a table alone, and you don't have a crowd of guys around you. Did you have to send them away for me? This somehow seems wrong." The women nodded in agreement, expressing their disappointment. "We do get a lot of attention, but it's usually from jerks," Linda explained. "They see us here, notice our wedding rings, and think we're looking for affairs. Just 3 married women who are mistaken for cheaters. We're here to dance and have a good time, and unfortunately, not many guys understand and appreciate that. Some people think they're irresistible to women, and we have to fight them off," Sharon added. "But after seeing how you behaved last night, we realized you were not one of those types. We're always glad to see you at our table. Look, I know it's none of my business, but I have to ask, why are 3 beautiful married women like you spending time here without your husbands?" A logical question, Rebecca replied. Linda's husband, a reserve soldier, was deployed to Afghanistan. At home, she felt isolated and restless. To overcome her loneliness, we decided to take her out. Since Sharon's husband worked night shifts and my husband was a long-haul trucker, we formed a close-knit group to ensure friendly companionship. We were united by a common love of dancing, and we found solace in each other's company. While dancing, we couldn't help but notice your story, Linda said. We noticed the absence of the ring that adorned your finger the last time we met. Now it's gone. What happened? Yesterday I filed for divorce and took off the ring, leaving it for her as a keepsake. Do you think that gives you the right to hunt? Sharon asked with a smile. Not at all. The reason for the divorce was adultery, and I'm not going to give her a reason to countersue. Great, Linda replied. We have a reliable dance partner. I spent the evening dancing with them and sharing them with other men they agreed to dance with. On Sunday, I was relaxing by the pool with a book. On Monday, I drove the rental car to work, hoping Michelle wouldn't see my car and think I'd left town, which meant she'd stay away. During the week, Michelle called me 6 to 10 times a day, and I ignored all the calls. Twice she tried to call from unfamiliar numbers, but as soon as I heard her voice, I immediately ended the conversation. Every evening I would definitely go to the bar to have a couple of beers. On Wednesday and Friday, I would find Rebecca, Linda, and Sharon there and join them for drinks. On Wednesday we danced until 10 p.m., and on Friday we stayed until closing time. I thought Michelle would realize by Saturday that I wasn't going to talk to her, so I returned the rental car and drove my own to work on Monday. Unfortunately, this decision turned out to be wrong. Leaving the building Monday morning, I noticed Michelle's car parked next to mine. When she saw me approaching, she quickly got out of the car and stood at the driver's door of my car. We need to talk, Jake, she insisted. Ignoring her, I tried to open the door, but she blocked my way. Come on, Jake, you have to let me explain everything. I pushed her aside, causing her to stumble and almost fall. By the time she regained her balance, I was already in the car. I rolled down the window and sternly told her, Michelle, you should go back and carefully read the letter that was attached to the divorce papers. I will only communicate with you in the presence of my lawyer, and even then we will only discuss the details of our divorce. I don't want a divorce, Jake, and I don't need you, Michelle. It's over. Accept it because my decision has already been made. With that, I rolled up the window and drove away, leaving her alone. It became clear to me that Michelle was not going to accept my refusal to talk to her. After I left work on Tuesday, as I was approaching my car, 2 men grabbed my arms. I recognized them as the ones who had been with Michelle in our bedroom. One of them warned me not to resist, saying that Michelle wanted to talk to me and I was being difficult. Even though I was only a few years older, they called me old man, probably because they saw me in a suit and tie with a briefcase. They thought I was easy prey, but I knew I could handle them. They didn't expect resistance from someone like me, and I could take them by surprise. It would be easy to take down one, and I was confident I could handle the other one-on-one. The commotion would attract attention and interfere with their plan. But then I started to doubt. Did I really want to escalate the situation? If Michelle arranged this, what would she do if I sent these 2 back to her bruised and beaten? Reluctantly, I let them escort me to my car. I sat between them, putting my briefcase on my lap as they drove me home. Once inside, they directed me to a chair and made sure I stayed seated. Michelle has made it clear that you are not going to divorce her, one of them said. When I tried to get up, the 2 men forced me back down, warning me to stay put. Michelle said that you would stay married, but there would be some changes in your lifestyle. I apologize for the fact that you had to find out about my condition this way, Michelle said. But now that it's known, we will have to deal with it. You are very dear to me, and I want you to know that I'm not going to give up on us. As for my condition, it's a strong attraction to intimacy that I can't control. I've had it since high school, and it manifested when we first began our physical relationship. Although there are medications to help deal with this, they have undesirable side effects that I don't want to endure. Besides, I like being this way. I have a strong desire for intimacy, and it's important for you to understand this. I always show you affection and attention. My actions don't cause you any harm. I care deeply about you and pamper you endlessly. If you could satisfy me all the time, I wouldn't be looking for pleasure anywhere else. Unfortunately, this is not the case. I have needs that must be met, so I share my intimacy with others. It doesn't mean that I love them. I just look at you and always come back to you. That's how it should be. I have drawn up a postnuptial agreement stating that I'm allowed to have multiple partners to maintain my mental health. If at some point you decide that you can no longer accept this arrangement, you agree to leave the marriage without any property. What will I get in return, except for terminated marital rights? I asked. You will still have the same loving partner that you have had for the last 6 years, the one you previously called perfect. Despite my actions, which now concern you, you once considered our marriage and life together to be flawless. The only problem is that your ego gets in the way. Someone else is now sharing what you've always considered exclusively yours. It's important for you to understand that our lives will continue the same as the last 6 years. This doesn't mean that you have become less important to me. You are an incredible lover who always leaves me completely satisfied when we are intimate. But you can't satisfy my needs as often as I require. I'll make a deal with you, Michelle, and I'll sign it if you agree to make some adjustments. I said. What adjustments? I refuse to be intimate with you on those days when you were with others, and we sleep in separate rooms. I can't do that. I need you to be next to me in bed. Can't you see that I love you and don't want to lose you? It's all right, Michelle. You don't need to change anything. I didn't want to sign your contract anyway. Okay. I'll make the changes and think about how to get it back to you later. I'll go to the computer, make changes, and come back right away. I struggled to get up from the chair where the two men had forced me to sit. I informed them that I needed to go to the bathroom, to which one of them suggested that I just wet my pants. Miss Michelle told you to stay where you are until she lets you get up. A few minutes later, she returned, read the document to me, and asked me to sign it. I told her that her friends were preventing me from getting up, and she allowed them to let me go. I got up, walked over to her, put my briefcase on the table, and took the pen from her. But instead of signing the document right away, I decided to read it first to make sure it matched what she had explained. I grabbed the note, grinned, tore it into pieces, and threw it in her direction. Grabbing my briefcase, I headed for the exit. Michelle's voice rang out, ordering the two men to stop me. They rushed towards me, but I quickly turned around and swung the briefcase at the head of the first man. He fell to the ground from the impact. The second man was caught off guard, which allowed me to quickly deal with him as well. I punched him, causing him to stumble backwards, and then kicked him in the groin, causing him to fall. Realizing that I needed to keep them incapacitated, I continued the attack, alternating blows to their sensitive areas until Michelle finally screamed, "Stop, Jake, or I'll use a gun," she threatened, pointing the gun in my direction. I defiantly challenged her. "Come on, do it." I took out my mobile phone, dialed 911, gave my name and address, and informed the operator that my wife had pointed a gun at me and was threatening my life. After receiving instructions from the operator to remain calm and not escalate the situation, I hung up the phone and sarcastically said, "Michelle, thank you for speeding up the divorce process. The divorce will be much faster and easier if you stay in prison. Jake, most likely when the police arrive, they will arrest you. You were furious with jealousy when you found out that your wife was talking to two men, and as a result, you attacked them with physical violence. If there are 3 witnesses, you will be charged with assault." "Michelle, why did you do that? What about your love for me?" "Don't worry, Jake. I'll help you. The lawyer won't press charges, and everything will be settled. But let's think about it. Michelle, Hank, and Joyce witnessed how these people picked me up and brought me to your house. They will confirm that I was not here of my own free will. They will tell you that you brought me to your house against my will, and when I tried to leave, your companions tried to stop me. When they failed, you pulled out a gun. I can spend the night behind bars, but when my witnesses testify, it will be you who will be behind bars, and I will definitely not bail you out. Let's look at the charges. Kidnapping, unlawful detention, threatening with a weapon, and knowingly making false statements to the police. Perhaps there are other charges that you have not considered. Michelle, the most reasonable solution is to remain silent. Despite my advice, Michelle and her 2 accomplices lied, and I ended up in jail. In the morning, I called Thomas Wright, informed him about the situation, and advised him to contact Gordon Marshall to get the recordings and take the necessary measures. Michelle found out that she would not be able to post bail for me until I appeared before a judge who would set bail, which would not happen until Monday. Fortunately, Wright had a connection with the assistant district attorney, to whom he showed recordings of the incident at the house. The recordings showed Barry and Tony holding me down while Michelle pointed a gun at me. The assistant district attorney also overheard her plan to lie and get her accomplices to do the same. As a result, when Michelle arrived at the courthouse on Monday for a hearing on my bail, she was immediately arrested. Arrest warrants were issued for Barry and Tony, and by evening they were behind bars. I refused to post bail for Michelle, and her parents didn't have the funds to pay for her release. Michelle hired a lawyer who informed me that she wanted to use my house as collateral. I laughed at this suggestion and ended the conversation. I left the motel and returned to my house, where I changed all the locks. Because Michelle had threatened me with a gun, Wright managed to get a protective order against her. If she somehow managed to escape from prison and got within 100 feet of me, she was in danger of immediate arrest and return to custody. Both Barry and Tony decided to cooperate with the authorities and testify against Michelle in exchange for leniency. Michelle insisted that she never intended to harm me, but only tried to protect her friends from my aggressive actions. After reviewing the recordings, the jury concluded that her declarations of love for me indicated that she was most likely telling the truth in an attempt to prevent harm to Barry or Tony. As a result, the threat charge was dropped. Despite this, she was found guilty of unlawful detention and making false statements to the police, as well as several other minor charges. The judge sentenced her to 9 months in the county jail and 1,000 hours of community service after her release. While she was incarcerated, my divorce went smoothly, and the only thing I lost besides Michelle was 20% of the value of the house. I deposited the money into her bank account and then headed to the bar next to the motel where I had been staying. Fortunately, Rebecca and Sharon were there, and I invited them to celebrate my newfound freedom with me. Linda was absent because her husband had returned from his deployment and she was busy. When I was asked why I wanted to celebrate with them, I simply replied, "I want to take a chance. I noticed that Linda and Sharon have rings, but you don't have one on your finger, Rebecca. I don't see any signs that you've ever worn one, so I don't think you've ever had a trucker husband in your life. Besides, I've always liked attractive redheads." Rebecca giggled and replied, "You've got me figured out." I took Rebecca's hand and led her to the dance floor. As we moved to the music, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt genuinely free. Looking at Rebecca's genuine smile as we danced, I realized that sometimes the end of one chapter is just the beginning of something better. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also set me free to find something real. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.